I have a relatively meaty Smash video in the works at the moment, so be on the lookout for that. But I awoke yesterday to Nintendo finishing an Animal Crossing Direct, made plenty of people happy. Animal Crossing and Nintendo fans, they got some jollies out of that, new content, cool stuff. And then immediately after, Nintendo pulled another classic Nintendo, just making a lot of people upset or disappointed in some decision or choice they made that's so backwards and weird that only Nintendo could spark such a unique, distasteful feeling. Which was essentially finally updating us on Nintendo Switch Online's expansion pack with N64 and Genesis games, and finally giving us the price, which... oh yeah, let's talk about that. We're talking about this today. I don't think I talk about Nintendo's Online in more detail that often. I believe it's been a couple of years since I did, so let's see if it got any better.
It didn't!
So the obvious catalyst for this discussion was the announcement yesterday afternoon that Nintendo would be dishing out N64 games, Genesis games, and Animal Crossing New Horizons DLC in an expansion pack to their online service. 9 N64 games to start out, about a dozen Genesis games, and again New Horizons DLC, but the expansion pack will come at $50 total for individual buyers and $80 for family plan people. I'll start this off with this and say, this is such a bad deal. To me anyways, this feels like a massive step up from how much the online cost since a few years ago, and far beyond both what anyone expected the price jump to be, as well as how big the price should be when looking at what's offered. And I'll preface this with, this is largely my input, reasoning, and opinion. Value is something that's subjective. One man's trash is another man's treasure. There are some people out there who see this as just fine or understandable, are willing to buy the expansion so they could just play some of their favorite N64 games or Genesis games, or games they never played but would like to try or something, and that's fine. I'm not here to tell you how you should be excited or disappointed in this, or how you should spend your money if you're set on this. Good on you if you're happy about this. At that same token, for once, amidst plenty of times Nintendo's done a thing that causes a split reaction across thousands of people, this is one of those rare instances to where I'm seeing a much vaster amount of backlash and negative reception more than otherwise. Which obviously to me is good because I'm in agreement with a lot of those people, but it also reflects just how a lot of people understand in multiple ways. This is just a bad deal, even beyond simply the price being too much. Across social media, Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, etc., the majority of people do believe the $50 for this expansion pack is too much. So why? What about this is a bad deal that's coaxing a video out of me? Why are a lot of people upset or disappointed about this? I can think of several reasons this is bad beyond the price on a surface level, and plenty of them are reasons, plenty others expressed online as well. The first initial reason for me, this doesn't improve or change the value of the service to any respectable degree. Nintendo Switch Online, ever since it was given a paywall, has offered a service for $20 a year of you getting access to NES and SNES games, cloud saving, the Nintendo Switch Online mobile app, special offers, and the obvious online multiplayer functionality. But ever since then, Nintendo's Online has continued to grow and grow as a much bigger meme of how laughable it is. This is a service that has maintained a peer-to-peer connection with an incredibly old netcode Nintendo uses across all of its games, so the vast majority of online experiences are laggy, slow, unbearable, and a pain to endure. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Super Mario Maker 2, Fortnite, Rocket League, Super Mario Party, Mario Tennis Aces, and other games, to lesser extents Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Splatoon 2, and ARMS. It's argued Nintendo's online experience is more of an obstacle than a service that adds to Nintendo. That's how bad it is for some people. And people have expressed most of this, primarily the poor online functionality, since the Wii. We've had this online infrastructure for over a decade at this point. It's been used for the Wii U's Online, and now the Switches. It wasn't as prominent of a joke or talking point compared to the past few years, because back then, it was free. We got bad online experiences 9 times out of 10 with Nintendo, but we didn't have to spend any money towards it. It was a feature that was given to us to use with our games, and we weren't forced to buy to get the most out of our games. But after the first year or two the Switch was out, they slapped a paywall over it like every other major console online infrastructure. PlayStation Network / PlayStation Plus, Xbox Live, Nintendo hopped aboard that paywall train, and it was $20. The principle behind this entire thing is something I've personally cared about more. If I'm paying for a service, I want it to be good. The incentive and value has to be justified paying for it regardless of the price. It's something people called attention to. But $20 for NES and SNES games, cloud saving, some special offers once in a blue moon, and online play was all something plenty of people didn't mind just sucking up and buying. The fact it was that cheap was the main argument for some people to grin and bear it. Like, everyone knew how bad it was, but it being cheap was the primary argument to just settle, just casually brush it off. And even then, that was something that most people could tell was that boundary Nintendo was kind of pushing really close to really set people off, that line/boundary of acceptance or comfortableness, just lightly holding that straw, hovering it above that camel's back. They were kind of teasing it, being like, how many more can we place on this camel, guys? How many more straws can we really push before it breaks its back? And that answer was this expansion pack. We're not forced to buy it if we want the online. The $20 offer for NES and SNES games is still an option, at least, if you don't want to waste an extra $30. But the service is adding another tier far beyond the initial price point. And bear in mind, they call this an expansion to the service, expansion pack, implying this is just a little something extra for you to sink your teeth and wallet into, an extra, a bonus, a little more incentive to keep you on board, but you're paying more than double what the base service costs for effectively the same thing on top of it. $30 more, $50, that's a whopping 150% price increase from its standard features just for Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis games, plus DLC for one game, alongside the family plan, which went from $35 to goddamn $80. Jesus, bro, that's a lot higher. That is a lot higher than I think everyone was expecting. And this circles back to my initial point with this. This is not improving the value of the service, and it either feels like we're paying a lot more extra for either a service that isn't worth the value of what it's giving to us, or paying extra for stuff we may not even care about or want. Yes, people have been wanting N64 games, and the initial lineup for what they have is pretty solid. And they are giving these games some online functionality, playing Dr. Mario 64 online, Mario Kart 64 online, Star Fox 64 online. They're higher res than their original versions, and they're getting save states, which is neat and all. I get where some of the positives come in, and where some might try to justify this, but that extra $30 isn't going to anything to make this service worth the purchase of essentially a brand new game if you're buying it at Walmart. Across NES, SNES, N64, and Genesis games, these are still 20 to 30-year-old ROMs of games that are being provided to us through this service that are still going to be drip-fed to us at an incredibly slow rate. This is a problem Virtual Console had back on the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS. Yes, Virtual Console's library across both generations were fantastic, but it took us forever to get to that point. People were criticizing how they took their merry little time just giving us those games, and it's the exact same case with Nintendo Switch Online. We've gotten such little games over the past several months ever since they introduced SNES games. It's been less consistent. Almost 5 years into this thing. We're over halfway done with this console's lifespan, and they're giving us only 9 N64 games and a dozen Genesis games, with the rest of those libraries likely not going to be expanded every other couple months like with NES and SNES games. Some basic features like messaging, in-console/in-game voice chat isn't coming to this thing. Some basic features like cloud saves they put behind a paywall. They're relying on that communication aspect to their app that literally nobody on planet Earth uses when Discord exists. The online functionality has remained the exact same since before the paywall, the same laggy, agonizing experience that people argue is more of an obstacle than a quality service. That extra $30, just like the $20, isn't going to make the online itself significantly better. It's partly because of them adding more classic libraries, but also solely just because money, profit. It's just for an extra tier that isn't adding a whole lot to the service beyond just a handful of 2 classic libraries. Millions of people spent $20 a year for Nintendo's online, which Nintendo has made over hundreds of millions of dollars on. I'm not even kidding when I say that. And this extra tier, solely just for them to make even more money with the same minimal effort they've been putting into this thing, by starting out with even less than how much they started out with both SNES and NES. Some have speculated the $50 price point is them paving the way for them to add even more games and primarily other consoles to the service that'll make it worth $50. Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, GameCube, Wii, DS, etc. It's their plan for the long term to add much more to the service to make it worth to where they don't have to ever bump that price up ever again. But the problem with that is we're not even close to that plan yet. Like, if they were to bump that price up that much because we were getting more of those consoles added to those libraries in the service, bump it up when we get to that point. And 64 games, especially for just the 9 of them now, isn't going to cut it. And even then, there's still a very possible, probable, viable chance N64 and Genesis are all we're going to get. It took us this long for us to even get to Nintendo 64, and it could be the pessimism in me, but I feel like hoping for any other systems to come just might be wishful thinking. The way it stands now, N64 games and Genesis games alongside NES and SNES are not worth the price of a whole game. And I've kind of said this already, you'll have your typical defenders, your white knights I suppose, who will defend Nintendo regardless of anything they'll do, regardless of how nasty or anti-consumer or whatever they are or do. I've come across a couple with this, but this again is one of those rare cases where there seem to be noticeably less. There seems to be a lot more opposition and negative feedback regarding this, and for good reason, but the actual general consensus, the majority of people who look at this and have bought Nintendo's online simply feel, this is just too much. It's too much to ask for such little in return, especially now when we're paying less than half of that for NES, SNES, and online play. When you can buy a lot of these for more or less $5 individually on past and current online stores, depending on where. There are/have been numerous ways to buy NES, SNES, and primarily Genesis games. There are a lot of ways you could buy these Genesis games especially for either the same amount or sometimes less. A lot of these games are games people have bought before, games people also resell online for full price or higher, so people are kind of connecting to how this is the same as how people sell individual N64, GameCube, or Wii games for stupid high prices online, equating it to highway robbery. And when they can be adding so much more to the service now, even within the spectrum of just N64 and Genesis games specifically, to justify that price point. PlayStation Plus and Xbox is online. It has its fair share of pros and cons. With their online services, they're $10 more than this expansion, but at the very least, you're getting messaging, voice chat, and other basic features with online and basic game consoles Nintendo's not providing. You're also much more guaranteed to have a good online experience because the netcode across Xbox and PlayStation is better. With PlayStation Plus, which is $60 a year, you do get 2 new games that come for free with the service you get to keep permanently. They usually range across modern titles like how they did it with Mortal Kombat X, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Fall Guys, etc. And even on the classic games front, Xbox offers an entire subscription service of over 100 games, all the Banjo titles, a bunch of Battlefield games, Celeste, Bug Fables. Yes, I said Bug Fables, it's on Game Pass. Destiny, Doom, Halo. Literally dozens of games, old and new, across multiple console generations for just $10 a month. $10 a month for standard, $15 a month for ultimate, but you have access to literally hundreds of high-quality first-party, third-party, and indie games for twice the amount per year of what Nintendo's online expansion's offering. These aren't games we keep either. These are games Nintendo's giving us access to that will likely be axed in more or less half a decade or so once the new service for the next system rolls around, just like how they cut the Wii Shop channel, will cut the eShop relatively soon for 3DS and Wii U, and how once again, these are ROMs Nintendo just has sitting around or choosing to slowly expand and add over the years at a really slow rate. At the rate they're expanding this service, similarly to how long it took Virtual Console to have a really good lineup, I'm nervous it's going to be a case of too little too late once it becomes worth the 50. Like, is the value going to be justified eventually? Are we going to get those other libraries and systems? But are we likely to get those within the last year of the Switch's life? Are they not going to drip feed this content anymore anytime soon? Are they going to, speed it up? Are they restarting this entire model distribution method come the next Nintendo system? Or are we just stuck with N64 and Genesis for the rest of the system's life, given it almost took 5 years for us to get N64 games, / a third Nintendo legacy console library? There's too many unknowns and questions people have that's just making people either wait it out or not buy it altogether. And that speaks for how poorly they've been handling this online in every sense beyond the online functionality. If people are going in or waiting to buy it to hope they add the right N64 game or add those extra libraries, you already did fail in pulling in those people. The way they've done their legacy content distribution and how poor it's been executed is finally catching up to Nintendo, to where it's reflecting more and more negatively on them now that the Switch's install base and active player base is as big as it is, and now that it's this expensive specifically for the kind of content people want and what they're offering. And beyond the online functionality, we're talking super old games with NSO that are several console generations old they're justifying for $50 if we're omitting the Animal Crossing DLC. Which brings me to my second problem with this. Me personally speaking, right? I have 2 primary gripes with this. This is one of them, the Animal Crossing DLC. There's no reason for Animal Crossing DLC to be here. Why is it tied to a service that has almost zero direct correlation to the service, alongside N64 and Genesis games? This is another flagship selling point Nintendo's using to market this extra tier. This is beyond dumb, really pointless. Why is it here? I understand Animal Crossing New Horizons is one of the biggest games on the entire system. You find someone with a Switch, you can bet they have either Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, or Animal Crossing New Horizons. Those have been the Switch's top 3 best-selling games for a good while now. 2 fatal flaws with attaching New Horizons DLC to the service. Despite New Horizons has over 30 million people who bought the game, That's still less than half the Switch's total install base. You still have millions of people that have a Switch, that bought Nintendo Switch Online, who don't play Animal Crossing, who aren't Animal Crossing fans. Beyond the N64 and Genesis games, non-Animal Crossing players are basically wasting their money on DLC for a game they may not even care about or own. DLC. Paid DLC. Every game that has DLC since the late 2000s has always been a one-time purchase that you just keep forever. That's a thing that should not be on this service, especially when the second fatal flaw that makes this even more ridiculous, you can still buy the DLC separate for $25 and keep that DLC forever once you buy it from the eShop. The price point for this tier has been nothing but speculative so far. People are speculating the massive $50 price increase because of the licensing issues with the Genesis games. That's the main one so far. Beyond this is a Nintendo service promoting Genesis titles. I find it kind of hard to believe, personally, because they're still roughly 30-year-old games that are sold for cheap on most virtual stores. And even then, there are so many ways you could buy Genesis games on Steam, console virtual stores, the numerous re-releases or classic collections Sega has, the Genesis Mini. Like, if it was the third-party licensing issue, I'd just axe that altogether if it meant we get a cheaper service. I'm fairly sure most people don't care that much about the Genesis games with this, but that's assuming it's the licensing with that. It's all speculative again. I personally feel it's because of the Animal Crossing DLC, especially when you can buy that separate for $25. And even when you get the DLC via NSO, any items you obtain in it will be kept. But just like how if you unsub to the service, or when it'll eventually be discontinued, you'll lose access to the archipelago like you lose access to the classic games. So then at that point, you might as well should just buy the DLC all on its own to keep it forever and not waste $25 per year via the subscription beyond the classic games. You're screwing over anyone who buys this who doesn't play Animal Crossing and are offering a worse deal for this DLC by locking off some of its content alongside giving us the option to buy it all on its own. It just makes its inclusion to NSO incredibly redundant and backwards as a result. And this is still going to be a problem if this is somehow a model for the service to where you'll get future DLC for games to come. Splatoon 3, you could buy DLC for that game with an NSO subscription. Maybe Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope or something too. Like other DLC packs get thrown in onto the service. Okay, but what about those packs you add that still have millions of people who don't own that game? It's still going to go away when you unsubscribe or when the service shuts down. And it goes back to the problem of paying extra for packs and games you may not even own, care for, or want, and even then, that's another unknown/question we don't have as an answer to among the multiple we already have. That's why I feel like that's the catalyst for the massive price spike and the primary reason why this feels like a scam. When you really break it down, it really is. It absolutely is just the N64 and Genesis games almost everyone's going to be paying an extra $30 for. And it's embarrassing. And my third and final reason why this strikes me as a bad deal, the other second primary reason this disappoints me, is Nintendo's consistently bad track record when they try to address piracy, also serving as showing Nintendo in their dominant position. The reason I criticize Nintendo when it matters, or disappoints, is because me and many others want them to do better as a company, as a business, and we all know there are plenty of ways for them, like any of us, to improve as a person, as a company, and the services they have. And there are so many ways they could have went about this service, even with that price point, and made it a better sell. For $50 a year for the service, you get access to NES, SNES, N64, and Genesis games, but for the Nintendo libraries, you'll have immediate access to a large chunk of all those libraries, and we'll add like 1 to 3 games every month consistently, or something like that. Like 30 games at least across all those libraries, maybe more for SNES and NES, and they'll add the occasional missing big one for N64 with some shovelware. Or, you buy the expansion pass, you get the Animal Crossing DLC forever, no compromises, and you can buy New Horizons if you don't have the game at like half off digitally, or something like that. I can make up many hypotheticals and ways to wrap my head around Nintendo potentially making this price jump make sense in the near future, but again, that's how you know they've basically failed if we've been stuck doing that since the start of the Switch. That's not how you should be building your model, both between raising your consumers' expectations without even directly doing so, and when you compare to how other companies and businesses distribute their services and software in the current generation. It's effectively worst case scenario with how Nintendo's progressing their online service, and it baffles me every time it's on the topic on Nintendo's legacy library. You'll often catch whenever there's a fan game, a mod, a ROM site shut down because Nintendo's zero-tolerance policy with piracy, how it's not condoned, it's illegal, it's immoral, what have you. They'll preach about how horrid piracy is, and you shouldn't not just pirate their games, but emulate their games even when you legally bought and own them. but then they make their own service dramatically worse and then wonder why people pirate their games. It's embarrassing, dude. This is literally why people pirate and or emulate Nintendo games. Not just because there's a lot more games they could get access to their ROMs of, not just because it's free, but the pirates are providing a much better service and incentive to invest in their service than what Nintendo offers. Like, there's already a lot of reasons people have to not shell $50 on this service. Whether you could buy a different game for $50 at Walmart, these games are games people own, or are easy to buy elsewhere for better prices. The idea of adding DLC to a game millions still don't own. Too expensive, not enough games or whatever. Another reason you could put on that is emulation and or piracy. I don't care much for piracy, condone, encourage. I can encourage not condoning piracy if you're providing a better service than what the pirates offer. Because that's quite literally how you combat piracy and maintain support for your brand. Because as it stands right now, these 4 gaming libraries, half of which offering such a small fraction of their overall libraries, is not cutting it, especially for $50, and it comes off as feeling like Nintendo can get away with it because it's Nintendo. I've seen a few people on Twitter use that as an excuse when they shouldn't, and that's biased as hell. Every company's guilty of this kind of mental ego boost, this dominant streak to where they feel they can make some anti-consumer decisions or just bad ones that they think they can, and sometimes they flat out do get away with it. Microsoft starting the trend of paying for online, PSN starting out from being free and then being bumped up to $60 with little to no bonuses, loot boxes, microtransactions, limited releases, console exclusivity, Xbox Live Gold's paywall forcing you to play those games only under that subscription. Anti-consumerism is when a company specifically acts in the interest of the business for money essentially, more than the interest of the consumer. You have some less egregious examples of anti-consumerism, and then you'll have others that are just flat out selfish, manipulative, and downright scummy. It comes in a lot of different forms, has popped up a little regarding this topic, and is something every gaming company has done more than once before. Every company's not a saint, every company's a business out for your money. Always remember that, they want your money, they're not your friends. I have a much fatter video planned regarding this and more of stuff Nintendo's done that a lot of people don't like, but the little defense I've seen is how stuff like this, it's stuff Nintendo's done before, and how it's not anti-consumer, because it's normal for Nintendo, so it's okay. No, it's not. No, the hell it's not, bro. You can make any type of action or behavior normalized within a specific setting. If it's morally incorrect or bad for multiple actual reasons, being normal doesn't magically make it okay or good. You know how utterly messed up that sounds if I linked abusive relationships or trauma to that logic? Mobile games and gacha games always have loot boxes and microtransactions, even today in some games. It's not suddenly kind, caring, or altruistic for companies to use that to exploit impulse buyers, cheat people out of a lot of money for models or PNGs, and prey on little kids to waste mommy or daddy's credit card for a Ninetales or Lucario costume. Every console and company will have hardcore defenders for sure, that's par for the course with any fandom, but apply any kind of that defense Nintendo gets to any other actual anti-consumer or money-grubby practice that other companies do, it's genuinely screwed up and scary. Nintendo shouldn't be getting any slack for pulling dumb stuff like this. This shouldn't be immune to criticism for mistakes and decisions that 100% deserve backlash and feedback, like every other company, and especially when they're scamming it non-Animal Crossing fans with this service and are overcharging for really old games you can find ROMs for on any website on a 2004 Potato PC, not even kidding. And when other services provide a much fatter service/incentive for a better price. The Animal Crossing thing especially is actually anti-consumer to the other 66% of the Switch's user base if they're buying this. And because of how bad I feel like this deal is, good for you if you think this deal is worth the purchase. I am not boarding that ship. I am not hopping aboard. I'm not sure if I'm going to stick with the standard fee either. This whole thing's just making Nintendo and the service look even grosser than it already did, topped off with the various scummy stuff they've done over the years. I'll do in a different video. But $50, that's a lot more than what people expected. It's not the value the vast majority equate NES, SNES, N64, and Genesis games altogether to for a myriad of reasons. The online service and online experience itself doesn't improve at all, beyond slow drip-fed game libraries expanded after 4.5 years. There's too many questions and unknowns to know how much better the service will get, or if it'll be too late by that point. The Animal Crossing deal especially is a scam for both parties. This is the exact opposite of what Nintendo should be doing to combat piracy. And this is just showing more people Nintendo's darker side of not understanding what modern services provide to make a satisfactory service, and is asking people a lot more money than necessary for the perks they're given. The whole thing's an embarrassing kerfuffle. I love Paper Mario, and I want to play Banjo-Kazooie, and I want more people to experience those games. They should not waste $50 on them, bro. Even I could say Paper Mario's not worth $50 for as great of a game that is. I hope Nintendo either makes the service even better soon or fixes the price. I'ma do DoorDash. I'll see you guys later. You guys have a wonderful day. Be safe. It's a bad deal, bro. You can't convince me otherwise. And stay super.
哟，嘿，妹妹，嘿，我来呀！呜呜，共和大啪啪。